freedom. It's freedom to me to learn something new, something different, something I might not have wanted to or didn't learn back in my younger days.
So
that's the way I think.
Oh, I think that's a great way to look at it. And go ahead, Melva. You wanted to. What was that, Lloyd?
I've listened to you long enough that it doesn't upset me because I've heard it.
Well, good. I'm glad I'm your safety net. That makes me feel a little bit better. But part of it is, and I was having this conversation, I can't remember who I was having this conversation with the other day, but about if you're looking at the Bible as just literal, as fact, that limits, this is kind of what Pam was saying, it limits the scope of what you can take from it, whereas if it is interpreted in the light of all the other historical knowledge that we have about, archaeology and languages and, what we know about different things that informs what's going on here, then it makes it easier for us to tell the story in such a way that it has porous edges where people can come into the different parts of the story. And there's not just one way in to the interpretation. So for me, it's the only way to work. And I believe that when God created us with a brain, that the part of the brain was, we were supposed to be using it. That was the deal, I think, So anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to get back to, because when we do talk about, we were talking about genocide last time. And, so when we talk about God as the author of genocidal acts, wiping out races of people for the benefit of the chosen people, it's really, it's really kind of nasty, so it's hard to wrap your brain around it, and it's hard to comprehend what is the positive report and what's the positive nature of this, so that you can bring it into your life and to your understanding. So, okay, well, thanks for those comments.
Susan?
Yes, sir.
I find studying with you over the past and now is kind of putting things into sequence as to, when it happened.
Yeah.
This time, here's what was going on. And for me, that's very, I guess in the past study, you heard this and you heard that, and you got them kind of strung around when there are connections. I just like that. I like the dates with it.
Well, and probably because when you do this kind of historical interpretation, you are bringing it into your world and looking at it through your glasses, your lenses, because that's the point. The point is not, we do certain amount of it. So we say, okay, what was happening then in the world of the text, what was going on, and what was the important thing that was trying to get put across when Jesus was talking to these people. What was Jesus trying to get out of the people that he was teaching? That's one thing. But now, if you were to say, if I were hearing this in my context now, what would Jesus be trying to say to me? And then you've got these two things plus anything in between. And it's not just, well, what Jesus was saying to those people is this, and that's really all there is to it. I think it just opens it up tremendously. And that kind of is what you guys are saying too. So I appreciate that, because hopefully that's exactly what happens, is that it opens up. So, and actually that I'm going to digress here for a minute, because I'm thinking we're having trouble with the feed. So I probably won't go the whole length today, but that's okay, because if we skip this far forward into Joshua, we're pretty much going to end it today. But I did want to make a comment about, I don't know if any of you have heard of this series now about Jesus' life called The Chosen. I think it started out as only an app that you download on your phone, but it's free. And there are different episodes, and you can stream them and throw them to your YouTube or on your TV or whatever. But when somebody sent it to me, and I was thinking, okay, this is going to be one of those really, really conservative, evangelistic kind of trying to get me to give my life to Jesus kind of thing. And I was thinking, I'm not sure I want to watch this, but I've been watching it, and now I see that they're showing it on Monday nights on Trinity Broadcast System if you have cable, at 8:30 on Monday evenings. And the thing about it is, it's what I would call historical fiction, because the characters are people that we know, Jesus and Mary and Peter and Matthew and Nicodemus and all these things. But the story is so much more fleshed out around those characters. And the thing that, normally, you've studied with me long enough that there are certain things that if they portray someone in this way, I know I'm not going to hook in. One of the first scenes is the exorcism of Mary Magdalene, the woman who had 7 demons. Okay. And so far in the 3 episodes that I've watched, she has not been referred to nor in any way, shape, or form connected to being a harlot. And I thought, okay, finally we get a Mary Magdalene whose only problem was she was possessed by 7 demons when Jesus, did the exorcism, and then she started following him. So I thought, okay, they've made that biblical choice, and they've stuck with scripture rather than tradition. So I'm liking this a lot. So, but those kinds of things, and there's so many books like that too, where they take the biblical story and flesh it out, because we don't have a lot of background on many of these characters. So to be able to take it and do what I call midrash, which is where you get, the backstory to somebody's character. But the thing is, usually now, because it's entertainment and we get drawn into the characters and their stories between them and, between each other, and that becomes what we have stuck in our head rather than the scriptural account. So midrash is a very tricky thing in that when you add information, and if you've been listening to me preach lately, I've been doing a lot more of that kind of midrash to help people get a fully formed picture of characters that are going to be important in the stories. But the caution is not so much they're telling the story wrong, but you just need to make sure that when you're reading it or when you're watching it, that you are aware that this is not the story as scripture tells it, because scripture tells a much tighter, less information story. Does that make sense? Okay, nod your heads. Put your thumb up. Okay, welcome, Melanie. Sorry, we were having some trouble here. So anyway, if you catch that, go ahead and watch it. And I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. Just, be clear what you're looking at. And it really is quite a lovely effort that they're trying to push the story of Jesus out into the world. And it's all free. As I say, you can either download the app on your phone, or you can watch I think the 3rd episode will happen on Trinity Broadcast Network next Monday at 8:30. So, take a look and then we can talk about it. So now that Melanie's here, we can move ahead. Melanie, we are starting at Joshua 23. I'm skipping ahead. Basically, everything in between that we just skipped over are the stories of each of the tribes settling where the division of the promised land was given to them. So you can have the Cliff's Notes of what we just skipped by going to the back to the maps of the promised land as it was settled, where the 12 tribes went. And you can take a look on the map and see, where did Reuben settle? Where did Benjamin settle? What kind of land did they get? If they were herdsmen, they're in the south, because that was the grazing land, that sort of thing. If they were farmers, they went north. along the Jordan and into the more fertile areas where they were going to plant crops. So you can take a look at the 12 tribes and see where they landed in the promised land instead of reading, because this is very repetitive, and it just goes through each of the 12 tribes, and it's like, and this is, the land that God gave them, and la 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 la. And then there's the assorted battle with somebody, doing something, and and having to go through that again for each of the 12 tribes. So now everybody's settled. Okay, everybody's where they're supposed to be in the land that God has appointed to them. And Joshua is pretty tired. He's been overseeing the settlement of the land with the tribes. And then I'm sure there were all kinds of, border skirmishes and all kinds of stuff about, my land stopped here and your land is over there, and, stop moving your fence and that kind of stuff. So this is chapter 23. A long time afterward, when the Lord had given rest to Israel from all their enemies all around, and Joshua was old and well advanced in years, Joshua summoned all Israel, their elders and heads, their judges and officers, and said to them, I am now old and well advanced in years, and you have seen all that the Lord your God has done to all these nations for your sake. For it is the Lord your God who has fought for you. I have allotted to you as an inheritance for your tribes those nations that remain, along with all the nations that I have already cut off from the Jordan to the great sea to the west. The Lord your God will push them back before you and drive them out of your sight, and you shall possess their land as the Lord your God promised you. Therefore, be very steadfast to observe and do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, turning aside from it neither to the right nor to the left, so that you may not be mixed with these nations left here among you, or make mention of the names of their gods, or swear by them, or serve them, or bow yourselves down to them. But hold fast to the Lord your God, as you have done to this day. For the Lord has driven out before you great and strong nations, and as for you, no one has been able to withstand you to this day. One of you puts to flight 1,000, since it is the Lord your God who fights for you, as he promised you. Be very careful, therefore, to love the Lord your God, for if you turn back and join the survivors of these nations left here among you, and intermarry with them, so that you marry their women and they yours, know assuredly that the Lord your God will not continue to drive out these nations before you, but they shall be a snare and a trap for you, a scourge on all your sides, and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from this good land that the Lord your God has given you. And now I am about to go the way of all the earth. And you know in your hearts and souls, all of you, that not one thing has failed of all the good things that the Lord your God promised concerning you. All have come to pass for you, not one of them has failed. But just as all the good things that the Lord your God promised concerning you have been fulfilled for you, so the Lord will bring upon you all the bad things until he has destroyed you from this good land that the Lord your God has given you. If you transgress the covenant of the Lord your God, which he enjoined on you, and go and serve other gods and bow down to them, then the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, and you shall perish quickly from the good land that he has given to you. Okay, I want to just pause there. As you listen to that, what jumps out at you? And it's kind of, I think this is kind of a mindset that helps us with the understanding about why all those peoples had to be destroyed and moved away and all that kind of stuff. And I want to be very careful in my conversation around that. But what do you take from this? Don't all answer at once.
Way.
Take it, say it again.
Go, Melva.
If they sin, then all this is going to be taken away.
Mm-hmm.
Like he said before, in the desert, if you go against me, then you're going to have the consequences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly that. I mean, it's like, the arrangement, the promise of God has strings attached, and that's one of the things where I think, because we, in our world, define God with using words like grace and mercy. And this God is a God of a different people. It is a God of of an ancient race of peoples for whom grace and mercy would probably have been seen not as strength, but as weakness. So if you're coming into the ancient world with one God, who's going to come up toe to toe with all of the Greek gods and all of the Roman gods and all of the pagan gods that people have been worshiping for generations, and say, this is the one, this is the God that's, supersedes all other gods. This better be, you better imagine this God and attribute to this God anything you possibly can to give that God authority and power, and let's make him creator of the universe. Let's make him the one who decides who lives and dies. Let's make him the one, by whom all things must be measured, so that if God says do this, the authority is there, we need to do it, and if we don't do it, there will be some kind of consequence. Okay.
Well, didn't they the land of Israel, they lost it, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And now they're trying, the people are trying to take it back or get it back.
Are you talking about in modern times or in the story?
Well, from then till now.
Okay.
In the meantime, they had lost it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now, and I guess the question is in the back of my mind, if this is their promised land, how come God isn't intervening to make it so?
You're talking about now.
Now.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, hey, there's a good question. And you would think at some point that somebody might say, maybe we messed up. Maybe this is not about us. Maybe this is truly about God. And, we haven't been paying attention, or, look back at the history, look back at the things, it's just kind of crazy when you think that's the way that this is where we've come, because it seems so clear to me, when they come out of Egypt into the wilderness, they get rules, and there's rules that they're supposed to abide by. And then they mess up and they worship a golden calf, and God gets mad at them, and there's a punishment. And then, they travel around and they go to the promised land and they go in, and God says, this is your land, take it. And they go, oh, we're scared, and they're not faithful. They don't trust God. So then they have to go back out for 40 years. I mean, just look at the history here, has repeated itself over and over and over again. And now here we are, in the promised land. God's clearing the land for them and is saying to them, if I have, spent all of these people so that you can take this land, by golly, you need to play by the rules. And if you don't play by the rules, this is not going to be what you're hoping it would be. So there's an investment in it from the people as well as from God. And I think there's a lot of times that we completely overlook that, that the people just aren't paying attention, that they're just not paying attention, or they're completely incapable, of being able to do the right thing, which is then where you get a lot of stuff, when you're talking about, the sinful nature of humanity. were they ever, I mean, here's a great theological question for you. Were they ever capable of being faithful to God the way God lines up the faithfulness? Because we don't see any instances of that. Even the greatest king they ever had, David, kept breaking the rules, you know? So maybe these stories of God setting you up to do something, and then God, you know, having to come back and punish you for not doing the right thing. You would think they would learn the lesson, but if that keeps going throughout history, if that keeps rolling forward, then when Jesus arrives and starts talking about a completely different kind of community, I mean, you kind of can get a handle on there why people just walked away from their boats, you know, or just left what they were doing to follow him. Because I mean, oh my goodness, imagine the inspiring tales that they were thinking about as Jesus talked about what life could be like when you love one another and respect one another and have mercy for one another, and, you know, and don't, you know, push against the power, just be kind. And, you know, it's like, you know, people are like, I think that sounds really cool, but I just don't know that I can do it. So then you have an entry point where people really understand what grace is about. And so when Jesus reveals this aspect of God, which, you know, from the conversation we were having earlier, if God would have written the story rather than the people who were being inspired to write it, how different would it have been? You know, and so maybe this is God's rewrite, you know, maybe the New Testament, or actually the coming of the word in Jesus, was the edit. This is the edited version. You know, I think you maybe didn't understand grace and mercy and love. So we're going to show you now, you know, what this really means. And then people had a context or a bad example with which to, you know, juxtapose the good example of what Jesus was doing. But I digress, as I always do. So welcome in, Sally. Good to see you. Sorry, we were having some trouble there. Okay, so Joshua is giving his farewell address to the people of Israel, and I'm going to go ahead and read on in chapter 24. Then Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and summoned the elders, the heads, and the judges, and the officers of Israel, and they presented themselves before God. And Joshua said to all the people, "Thus says the Lord, God of Israel, long ago your ancestors, Terah and his sons, Abraham and Nahor, lived beyond the Euphrates and served other gods. Then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through all the land of Canaan and made his offspring many. I gave him Isaac, and to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. I gave Esau the hill country of Seir to possess, but Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. Then I sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt with what I did in its midst." And how come nobody grieves out about all the Egyptians who died in the plagues? I never hear anybody say, yeah, well, God did that too, you know. Then I sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt with what I did in its midst. And afterwards I brought you out. When I brought your ancestors out of Egypt, you came to the sea, and the Egyptians pursued your ancestors with chariots and horsemen to the Red Sea. When they cried out to the Lord, he put darkness between you and the Egyptians and made the sea come upon them and cover them. And your eyes saw what I did to Egypt. Afterwards, you lived in the wilderness a long time. Then I brought you to the land of the Amorites, who lived on the other side of the Jordan. They fought with you, and I handed them over to you, and you took possession of their land, and I destroyed them before you. Then King Balak, son of Zippor of Moab, set out to fight against Israel. He sent and invited Balaam, son of Beor, to curse you, but I would not listen to Balaam. Therefore he blessed you, so I rescued you out of his hand. When you went over the Jordan and came to Jericho, the citizens of Jericho fought against you, and also the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Girgashites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I handed them over to you. I set the hornet ahead of you, which drove out before you the 2 kings of the Amorites. It was not by your sword or by your bow. I gave you a land on which you have not labored, and towns that you have not built, and you live in them. You eat the fruit of the vineyards and olive yards that you did not plant. Now, therefore, revere the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your ancestors served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. Now, if you are unwilling to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. Then the people answered, far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For it is the Lord our God who brought us and our ancestors up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did those great signs in our sight. He protected us along all the way that we went, and among all the peoples through whom we passed. And the Lord drove out before us all the peoples, the Amorites who lived in the land. Therefore, we also will serve the Lord, for he is our God. But Joshua said to the people, you cannot serve the Lord, for he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or your sins. If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after having done you good. And the people said to Joshua, no, we will serve the Lord. Then Joshua said to the people, you are witnesses against yourselves that you have chosen the Lord to serve him. And they said, we are witnesses. He said, then put away the foreign gods that are among you, and incline your hearts to the Lord, the God of Israel. The people said to Joshua, the Lord our God we will serve, and him we will obey. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day, and made statutes and ordinances for them at Shechem. Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God, and he took a large stone and set it up there under the oak in the sanctuary of the Lord. Joshua said to all the people, see, this stone shall be a witness against us, for it has heard all the words of the Lord that he spoke to us. Therefore, it shall be a witness against you if you deal falsely with your God. So Joshua sent the people away to their inheritance. After these things, Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. They buried him in his own inheritance at Timnath-Serah, which is in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua and had known all the work that the Lord did for Israel. The bones of Joseph, which the Israelites had brought up from Egypt, were buried at Shechem in the portion of ground that Jacob had bought from the children of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of money. It became an inheritance of the descendants of Joseph. Eleazar, son of Aaron, died, and they buried him at Gibeah, the town of his son Phinehas, which had been given him in the hill country of Ephraim. The end. Okay, what do you see? Or comments, or just things that you saw? Meditations. I want you to make sure that you mark a big mark on chapter 24, because chapter 24, the first half of chapter 24 is like a synopsis of the Exodus. So, or actually even before, from the recorded history of Abraham up until them moving to the promised land. So if you want a Cliff's Notes of, the first 5 books of the Bible, you got them in about 25 verses. So dog-ear the page. Ooh, did I say that? In your Bible. Or mark it.
I know, I love the one saying, is that it was in, let me see here, 15.
Yep.
But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord.
Right.
You
Right.
know, we still use that today.
Mhm.
I think I have it somewhere in my house here. You know, it's just one of those phrases that always, sticks with us, and it's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Much as we try, we still err.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the beginning of that verse where it says, now, if you are unwilling to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve. And it's like lots of times you'll see that, just that part, choose this day whom you will serve. But it's really, when Joshua says it, it's like, hey, you've got this amazing God who's done all of these things for you. And if you can't choose that God, then choose who it's kind of like Peter saying, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, So, I mean, I like the irony of that. If you're not going to choose God, choose this day whom you will serve, and I bet the list is pretty small,
The thing was, Joshua wasn't giving the people, or God wasn't giving them grace.
True.
We didn't get grace until Jesus got on the scene.
Mm-hmm. There are threads of grace throughout the Old Testament, but, it is not the overarching witness of God, the relationship between God and God's people. As I say, there are little pieces of it, little glimpses of it, but it's not the main thematic narrative of the story. But one of the things I love about this too is where Joshua is talking about, all these people that God pushed out. Some of them came and joined you. Some of them fought against you and gave in to you. Some of them just get pushed away, and I will continue to keep them pushed away unless and until you start to let them take over. Let the pagan gods have a way back in to this, I'm trying to keep you separate and keep you holy. So if you stay faithful to me, if you say stay faithful to God, you'll be fine, and I like to think too that when God has pushed people to other lands or something, that he had something in mind for them as well. Unfortunately, in our land, when people got pushed away to other lands, you can look and see where they are today and kind of think, man, we wish there would have been a better way for us to deal with them. And maybe that's what this time is about now, for us to be thinking as we talk about not retribution, but can't think of the word I want, where we go back and talk about, what are we going to do about slavery? It's not it's an R word, but I can't think of the word I'm looking for.
Push to reservations.
No, this where we are going to give recompense. I mean, we're going to not reimburse them, but somehow reparations is the word I'm looking for. Somehow we're going to do whatever we can to repair the damage that we did to the Native Americans and to those who were enslaved, and to people, Black, brown, and indigenous people, and it just, maybe now is the time that we can start thinking about that in a different way, so that we can, for the point of repairing the breach that has been done when we just stomped into America and pushed people to the sides and just took over. So I like the fact that Joshua is warning the people. It's like, look, here's the way to make everything work great. Do what God told you to do. Simple. But if you're not going to do that, expect that this will happen, because the people who do not trust God, who are not faithful to God, are going to reap the consequences of the world. So I think that it's kind of cool that Joshua, his final words to them are just, be faithful. Just do what God has asked you to do. God has given you all of this amazing stuff. Vineyards that you're getting the produce from the vineyards and the olive orchards and all these things that you didn't plant. You just walked in and took over, and now it's yours. So don't take it for granted, kind of thing. And that's where, then I could do a really good stewardship sermon. You walked into this life, and don't tell me that you created everything that you have. That's where we go back to the conversations about privilege, the knapsack of stuff that we carry with us, the maps and the clues and the, books to tell you how to do stuff and things that we just got because we were born white, that a lot of other people didn't get. So, those are the kinds of things I think Joshua is trying to get across to the people and say, you have been given this promised land, a land of milk and honey, where you can exist and live and raise your families in safety and security and abundance. And all you have to do is stay faithful to God, and that was too hard. It's always too hard. So isn't it great that we're baptized? We can just claim Jesus because we can't do it on our own. So what else you got? Any questions, comments? Joshua Fan Club notes.
I have a question.
Yes.
It's about the intermarrying. So I know they did intermarry. Every population, Jewish population that was moved all over the place, eventually began to get characteristics of the resident population. So there was some intermarrying going on. How do they, is it that they had the people they intermarried with have to become Jewish, or?
Well, not at this time. I think in the different, are you talking about now in the diaspora, like in Jesus' time when Jews started to leave out of Israel and move around in Europe and that kind of thing? Or are you talking about in the ancient world? I
guess both. Was it, I guess my question is, was it really, it says, it was, my footnote says that it was centuries after the time of Joshua, the banning of intermarriage became part of the renewal led by Ezra. So if they're renewing it,
that would have been, and that would have been after, about the time of the exile. So they had been taken into captivity in Babylon and kind of repeated the whole enslavement thing, and then came back home again. And Ezra and Nehemiah were rebuilding the temple and, reinstating the laws that they didn't have access to while they were in exile. But yeah, I think when the renewal came, that they had the freedom to worship and to be openly, Jewish in Jewish life kind of thing. They did ban the intermarriage, but up until that point, you kind of had to intermarry. There wasn't the holiness codes that were in place in Jesus' day, where there wouldn't have been an intermarriage between a Samaritan and a Jew, or any of that kind of stuff. But at this point, I don't think it's so much the mixing of blood as it is the mixing of gods. Okay, so that if you were to allow people from the land who lived there to live there with you and to coexist, then you were not to, get involved with the idol worship or any of the stuff that they were doing as far as their worship. Just don't let that get into your religious practice. So they were more concerned at that point with keeping the purity of the faith, because as they came into the promised land, now they're trying to reconstitute who they are as the people of God. They really didn't have, when you think about how they got to Egypt, they came to Egypt with Joseph and his family, and then it was like 500 years of them multiplying among themselves. And it doesn't say anything about them not intermarrying or mixing with Egyptians at the time. But, they were growing in population, which is what scared Pharaoh so much about them, that as they got more and more populous, that at any given time they might, take over and, run over the Egyptian political system, that they would just take over. So that's why they wouldn't, they enslaved them, they kept them down, they wouldn't let them worship, they wouldn't let them do anything. So really the people of Israel didn't form their identity as a race and a people of a religious identity until they landed in the promised land. So the most important thing for them as they constitute this idea that we have of, how they stay holy and set apart and they don't mix with Gentiles and, all that kind of stuff. At this point, we're more concerned about the purity of their religious identity and their religious world around them. So they're creating that now. And at the end of this cycle, we'll have, we got David and Solomon and that whole thing where it all slams together in Jerusalem, which becomes not only the political capital, but the religious capital of the area. And so at that point, then they became completely identified as, God's chosen people. So it kind of goes like this. But right now, I think what Joshua is warning them against is the religious impurity rather than intermarriage. But there will be other times that will become very important. That answer it?
That answers it very well. Thank you.
I love it when I answer a question. What else? Anything else come up in this? Okay.
No.
No, we're done.
Right.
Okay. Well, here's the question. No, go ahead, Lloyd.
I was going to say, well, it's kind of like what's happened here, isn't it? We have taken on the people that God told us you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, and we've done it with the people that are here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still going on.
Yeah, it always is. That's why I said it's as if to say, why do we look at the people of Israel and think, what are you guys are just such dunderheads? Why don't you do the easy thing and just be faithful to God, as if we're doing it? It's like, so, it is part of the human condition that we just don't like it when we're not in charge.
Well, Susan, something's kind of bothered me over the years is the Catholic Church religion. It seems like I pick up on that they don't put Jesus as the center,
Mm-hmm.
or they have Mary right there as big and thing, and they pray to her. To me, that's kind of like praying to another idol. Or
Mm-hmm. Well, the distinction there with the adoration of Mary and being married to intercede is the word intercessor. I don't think that Catholics pray to Mary for deliverance or for healing or whatever, but they're asking her to intercede to Jesus or to God, so basically, would please ask your son to take care of this because I'm not worthy to go talk to him directly. And, that's the thing. So the adoration of Mary, just, the fact that she was Jesus' mother and, that they have statues of her and that sort of thing is an honoring of her and her particular place in the story of Jesus and in being his mom. The praying to Mary is the fact, in its purity, the prayers to Mary are for her to intercede with Jesus on our behalf because we are not worthy. So in its purest form, it's kind of lovely that you'd say, I just don't feel like I can go directly to Jesus because I'm not worthy, or I'm embarrassed, or I'm ashamed to ask for what I need. But Mary seems like a really nice lady. Like the nice lady who lives on the corner,
But we've been brought up that we can go directly to God or to Jesus.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And, I'm not sure exactly. I have not really studied what they call Mariology, which is, just the study of Mary and how she got developed in the Catholic Church and in the piety of Roman Catholicism. But my assumption is that, you know, once Jesus left, she was the closest thing to God they had. You know, they got Peter, you know, but, you know, Mary was faithful. She was there at the end. You know, she was with them the whole time. They knew her. So to venerate her as closest to God, I think it was a natural progression. The idea of the intercessor part, I'm not sure how that developed. So that might be something you might want to Google, or maybe you can pay Pam to do it because she's our researcher. But yeah, you know, how we got from just venerating Mary as Jesus' mother to actually praying to her, which just smacks of people getting confused about, you know, what prayer is for and how that works. So, and yeah, Lutherans don't, because we accept the saints and we, you know, we mark them and venerate them, but we don't pray to them as intercessors the way the church does. And I'm sure at some point in my, you know, my critical nature is saying, I'm sure at some point there was money involved in that. You know, if you pray to, you know, you got to buy a medal or something so that you can pray to St. Joseph or, you know, whoever to take care of things for you. Not so, you know, so as not to bother Jesus, you know. So we kind of have a whole different idea of the relationship between us and Jesus. So, okay. We are just about out of our time here. So one of the things, you guys are going to have to trust me on the next step, because normally we would go to Judges, but I have some notes here, and we did kind of a skip and hop across Judges at one point. But
Antoinette Jebber Selassie.
Anyway, I'm going to I'll pick our next step. If you have a real sense of something you want to go and do next, send me a note and we'll figure out where we go next. We can, because the story here kind of I mean, we're in the promised land, we're there. Okay, so maybe we want to move ahead into 1st and 2nd Kings or Samuel and kind of pick up the David story, which is kind of the next big person, or maybe we do want to go ahead and work through Judges, but I need to just to take a look and see what's there for us to discover. Otay, you trust me on that? Say yes. Thank you.
But
Okay.
I have a question real fast. Is there anything in Judges, because I haven't read it. Is there something in Judges I should read before we move on to the next step?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I said, is there anything in Judges I should read?
Well, you could go ahead and read for a little bit, because it is kind of cool. I mean, Deborah was one of the judges, and we get her story, one of the few women in a position of authority in the ancient, you know, in the promised land. So you could just read a little bit ahead if you want to. If we do go into Judges, we'll just keep reading. I mean, we won't jump into it at like the 15th chapter or anything. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So I'll see you guys next week. Same time, same channel. Hopefully we won't have any problems. For those of you watching on Facebook, I'm really sorry that we had some technical difficulties with the feed, but we'll be fine, and we'll see you next week at the same time. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye, everybody.